people around the new administration, economic advisors, are saying that we can grow our way out of this. If we could get GDP growth, real GDP growth to 3 to 4%, we could actually grow our way past the liability problem. And there is something of an analogy in the private sector with the U.S. banks in the 80s when they had the crisis in the Latin American debt situation, and they really couldn't cover the liabilities. They extended the maturities, but they were allowed to earn their way out of it by building up reserves by making profits elsewhere. Could we do that with the U.S. economy?
Not now. Let me explain to you why. A necessary condition for economic growth is that output per hour grows at a rate probably close to 2%. We're now under 0.5%, meaning we're essentially, for the last 5 years, have been growing scarcely at all with respect to output per hour. But once you've got an output per hour forecast, and you know what the total level of the population or the working force is, you just multiply one times the other, the hours and the productivity, and you get what the GDP is going to look like. There are little variations here and there, but that's fundamentally the issue. If you don't get output per hour growth, you will not get the type of GDP growth which the people who are talking about, we can now grow our way out of it. Unless you change the fact that we've got this 9% average annual increase in entitlements, which is eating into the domestic savings of the economy, which in turn is the critical issue which is required to get capital investment going. And capital investment is the key element in productivity growth. So it's this entitlement issue which nobody wants to discuss. The Democrats don't want to discuss it. The Republicans, who actually have been spending more and faster rate than the Democrats in the last half century, nobody wants to touch it. It's the third rail of American politics. If you're running for office and you mention it, you lose. And unless and until that issue is addressed, I don't see how we get the economy growing, because we're borrowing savings from abroad. We're now up to $8 trillion debt net for the total system. You can't keep doing that, and I doubt very much if we're going to be able to do very much more borrowing from abroad. And if we can't do that, and we don't have domestic savings because it's being crowded out by entitlements, where do you go from there? I mean, it's a nice idea to say, well, we'll, build our way out of it. Good luck.
So where do you go from there? Because one of the biggest changes we've seen since you first came to Washington, these many years ago, is the leveraging up. And first it was in private leveraging, both households and companies. And then since 2008 or so, it feels like we've taken that and put it on the public balance sheet, both in this country and around the world, with central banks and with fiscal authorities. Is there a limit to how far up we can leverage our society?
Well, the key issue is going to be to what extent the money supply is growing. And the reason why I think that stagflation, the inflation part, is relevant here, is there are two forces that are going on. First, importantly, is that the money supply, which had been growing at about 6% annual rate very steadily earlier this year, tilted up, and we're now close to 9% annual rate. That's a necessary but not a sufficient condition to get the inflation rate going quickly. But we're also finding that the labor force is running out of extra workers. The unemployment rate now is under 5%. You can't go very much lower, which means that the 150 to 200,000 increase in payrolls a month is not going to continue on because we're running out of people. So if you have a situation where the issue is getting to be an ever tighter labor market, then wages begin to move, and indeed they are already beginning to move. And when wages are moving and the money supply is accelerating, those are the critical issues which engender inflation. They are on the move at the moment. I see no evident endeavor on the part of either Republicans or the Democrats or anybody else for that matter willing to come to grips with what the issue is, because it's politically a hot potato.